Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop Fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies. All that said, producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes.
Becoming a Next Reel member gives you access to all sorts of additional and exclusive content. Plus, you're helping us keep the lights on. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership, where you can learn more about becoming a member, which costs a measly $5 a month, practically the same as one fancy coffee drink. And you get so much more.
Every month, we record a bonus episode exclusively for members. Those episodes cover movies from whatever series we're covering at the moment, or add to previous series.
Some movies we've covered that only members get to hear us discuss include The Blues Brothers,
The Russia House,
Naked Lunch,
Independence Day,
The Hot Rock,
and Relic, the better one. Plus, members get to vote on what we're going to discuss for those episodes.
We also record additional pre- and post-show content in regular episodes that only members get to hear.
Like conversations about similarly themed movies.
And answering listener questions from our live member chat.
Speaking of our live member chat, we record almost all of our episodes in Discord, where members can chat right along with us live.
Members get access to other members-only channels in our Discord community as well. On top of all that, members get all episodes a full week earlier than everyone else in a private Next Reel feed just for them that includes all the shows in the Next Reel family. The Next Reel, the Film Board,
movies we like, Sitting in the Dark, and more new projects on the way.
To top it all off, members don't have to listen to ads. We've already eliminated those annoying, dynamically inserted ads that, let's face it, we all hated.
We are listening to you.
We love podcasting for a living, and those ads help to pay the bills. Now, we're counting on you, dear listener.
We promise. We aren't going back to those terrible, dynamically inserted ads that don't relate to us at all. All we ask is that you consider supporting the Next Reel family of podcasts with a membership.
Again, it's $5 per month or $55 per year. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership.
thenextreel.com/membership. Get your access to early, ad-free episodes with bonus content, member bonus episodes, and access to member channels and live streams in Discord by signing up today. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The train is over, you crazy bastard.
The train. They strafed it. They sabotaged it.
Stop! I want this engine back on the rails.
If we had 10 times as many men, it couldn't be done.
I tell you it will. Do you hear me? I tell you it will.
They bombed it.
We're talking about The Train, Andy, 1964. John Frankenheimer. Are you a big fan of The Train? Did you know about The Train going into it? Just first time?
It's not a first time. I own it. I really enjoy this film. Solid Frankenheimer. So much better than The Monuments Men.
Yeah.
It's just a film I really love and adore. Burt Lancaster is, glowering through it. It's just, it's really spectacular.
Here's the thing. Okay, two things. One, this was my first time seeing this movie. Grateful for it. What an incredible movie. I had a blast. You're going to have to teach me all the good stuff that you always teach me. Two, I did read a quote that says one of the reasons this movie stands out, I can't quite find the original where I wrote this down, saying that despite being in his early 50s, Lancaster performed his stunts. And I really resented that line. I so resented that line. Yes, there was some dangerous stuff. He rolled a lot away from trains. That was scary. And the trains
Jumped
were
onto
real.
moving trains. Yeah.
Jumped onto moving trains. That was awesome.
Ran across trains' roofs. It was all sorts of good stuff.
It's possible I resented it because I think I would struggle to do some of those stunts.
And he had injured himself too. Like he actually sprained his leg. I can't remember exactly how he sprained it, but that is the reason they had to incorporate him getting shot in the leg when they escaped the train that first time, so that he could then legitimately be limping through the rest of the film.
Oh my God. Man, bury yourself in the part. I had a blast with this movie. So the movie itself it's based on a book. It's a nonfiction book called Le Front de l'Art by Rose Valland. And it is telling the story of this period in time where the Nazis were trying to take and consolidate a lot of the national culture across Europe into Germany. And this was them taking a train full of French works of art to the tune of, as they said in the movie, I think 10 billion francs.
Lots. It's, any artist that you see in a museum these days, it's like those big artists, Picasso, Monet, Manet, Renoir. It's just like all of the big names. They were moving. The Germans were trying to take all of these for themselves back to the home country before the Allies arrived, and it turned into Paris, open city.
That's right. Boy, we're again nailing our European war history right now. What makes The Train an important film?
Aside from being a strong representation of what Frankenheimer was doing through his career, and very specifically in the 60s. If you look at his work in the 60s, I think this just fits right in with the political thrillers he was doing. Before this, he had The Manchurian Candidate, 7 Days in May, and then he did Seconds after this. And, I think that the types of stories that he was really interested in, it just seems to fit in with that whole vibe. And of course, this is, I think, the third of 4 films that he does with Lancaster in this period. And so they clearly had a good working relationship. And telling this story, I think it's an important one in the scope of this interesting theme about the value of art versus the value of human life. And they talk about this quite a bit through the film. And in the beginning, Labiche is not interested in saving the art because he's already lost too many men and he doesn't want to lose more. He doesn't want to lose anybody else. And he's just like, I just don't care. And it's an interesting point for him as a character when he makes that turn and realizes that there perhaps is value in saving these paintings and kind of what it means to France and in a larger picture, what it means to humanity to have these paintings continue to be available. And so I think that's one of the important aspects of this film in the scope of war films is we're getting this complex story talking about, again, it's French resistance versus the Nazis, but it really boils down to, how do we put value on a painting? Where is there more value in a painting over human life? I don't think the film is set to give us any easy answers to that, particularly when we get to that kind of those final moments of the film and some of the final shots. I think it's something that Frankenheimer smartly, puts there for us to then talk about and think about, and doesn't necessarily give us the answer. And so I think those are some of the key things. And plus, this is, I think Frankenheimer himself said this was the last big black and white action film that had been made. And you can see a film like this being made in color, the big explosions and just everything going on in the train yards and everything. But I think there's something when it comes to just kind of this story that takes place in World War II that just the black and white kind of emphasizes the world of war, and it just feels that much more gritty as we watch it. So
I think that's a great point. Just the look of the film, and particularly those sequences that call out great use of black and white, like the principal caper when they have to mark the first three train cars with the giant. When they were talking about the plan, I was like, oh, they're going to put an X on the roofs. They end up slathering themselves and the roofs, and there's paint like falling off the sides of the train. And it's one of those things that looks so dynamic and dramatic, and it's anxiety producing because, come on, like there are like literal Nazis right there. Like they're getting practically dripped on. It's very intense sequences of that kind of stuff. I do think the way the film is structured, especially watching it, like going into it, knowing not much about the film other than it was a Frankenheimer film, and knowing what Frankenheimer brings, I was surprised at the level of sort of ethical quandary that he was presenting in this movie. Like, at what cost culture it's not a sideline question for this movie. It is central to the movie. And the case they make in the beginning, when the colonel walks in to his boss and says, "You canceled my train," and he says, "Yeah, I don't share your love of art, and we need the train for other things." And he says, like at that point in the movie, it's hard for me as a viewer not to see, yeah, I can see why he made that decision. At what cost art? It's art. We have real human lives we're trying to get out of the city. And I think making that case in a way that I can actually empathize with the jerk who said no to a train full of priceless objects of art is kind of a masterstroke. The fact that it comes back later and we have essentially the same conversation with Lancaster, I think it's like an hour and a half into the film, where he's talking to his buddies who are left, and they say, what about Papa Boule and Pasquet? Like, they died for this. And Lancaster says they're dead. They'll never know. And I think it's Pasquet who says, but we will. We'll know what happened here. We'll know that we made a choice to dishonor their lives, is what I'm reading into it. And I think that is a significant sort of weight in this movie that makes it both an outstanding action film with, like you said, lots of great explosions and sneaking about and climbing on rooftops and all of the great stuff you want out of an action film, but also a thinker, and a better thinker than the Monuments Men.
Well, and we're getting conversations throughout the film with various characters that really put all of this in perspective for us. When Labiche is hiding out in Christine's hotel, she gets really pissed at him when he's foolishly trying to go call one of these other towns ahead of time to kind of put this plan into place. And then he kind of comes in and hides and he stages this whole thing in the kitchen. She gets really pissed because she could have been killed if they figured out that she was lying and kind of hiding whatever it was that he had been up to. Because at that point, she doesn't even know. She's somebody whose husband had been killed. And, she, as she says, this other couple had comforted her. And then later in the film, she says, now I'm going to have to comfort her because now her husband has been killed. And so from her perspective, she really is kind of in that side of like, all of these actions that you're doing, that she has that conversation, all these actions that you men keep doing just leave us women having to comfort each other. It's like this look at the side of humanity where you're hurting us by kind of continuing with this fighting that's going nowhere. But again, just the same perspective. Like, she sees how all of these different people, like the station master who ends up getting killed, and she's the one who has to now comfort his wife. Like, all of these people are getting killed because they also see the value in protecting the art. And it becomes this understanding that people have that human life is absolutely valuable and we need to value it. But there is also something about this larger societal need to kind of preserve this art and make sure that it doesn't just get pilfered by the Germans and disappears. And it's interesting to watch these people start like having that realization to the point where they're willing to die for it. I mean, I think that's the main strength of the film, that we're seeing this change happen over and over again.
And the fact that the movie opens with a conversation between the woman who runs the museum and our colonel. He's a colonel, right? I keep calling him a colonel.
He is.
I think he's a colonel.
Colonel Franz von Waldheim.
Right. So Waldheim, it feels like they together, that opening sequence, they understand exactly what you're talking about. And the fact that we get both sides of the occupation having a conversation that centers on the value of art as it is a chronicler of human life, and of artists as they are chroniclers of human life. And I think that is a really important piece, because it sets up the ideology of the film right up front, that everyone, good guy, bad guy, understands the value of art, whether their actions, as you watch their actions, viewer, whether you're on board with that is the sort of ethical or moral barometer that you're living with. I thought that was a really interesting sort of litmus test of what is ethical good in the space of this kind of a movie.
It also is a very interesting conversation because, as I call him, old VW, as he's talking to the mademoiselle who runs the museum, he has that conversation about how he says, this is degenerate art, as a loyal officer of the Third Reich, I should detest it. And that's exactly like later when he's talking to that other colonel, as you said, like that person's like, this is disgusting. Like, we don't want to, I don't care. I don't have any interest in looking at this degenerate art. Like, there is this Nazi view of it, and you can see how this particular colonel sees himself as almost more evolved because he's able to kind of look past that and see that there is this value in it. And that is a really interesting element to include in him as a character. And then, what's so great about that scene is how quickly it turns, and his men come in and he just looks over to her as she's all confused. And he's like, we're taking everything. And it's just such a shock, but it reveals how, on the one hand, as a person, he can look past the fact that it's art perhaps by Jewish people, by other people that they should be looking down upon, and see more in it. But at the same time, he is a greedy Nazi and he's just going to do everything he can to take it.
Yeah. And on the other end of the movie, right, that last conversation they have after everything has kind of been resolved and there's wreckage of art all strewn all about the train tracks, he has this conversation with Lancaster's character and he says, you just got so lucky. Like, the entire ethical sort of moral argument that is made by the film pivots on luck. You got lucky. You had no idea why you were doing what you were doing, and you beat me. It's fine. I lost, but yeah. And then, of course, we have this just really weirdly controversial, it's weird and controversial, like Lancaster action at the end of the film that I think is a sort of stunning testament to what? That Waldheim was right, or that Lancaster's character does understand what he was doing and was really sort of putting an end to the deeds of the German thieves.
It's definitely an interesting point. I think there's something to that. It's like, I suppose there's a variety of ways you can kind of look and see kind of what his decision to basically mow down von Waldheim at that point. But also, I mean, I think it's interesting because von Waldheim really kind of like demeans him quite a bit. And he says, like, you don't understand what you've done. Like, these paintings in your hands are like putting pearls in the hands of an ape.
Yes.
Like, the way that he just, like, he is so above everybody. And Yeah, I mean, even above the other Germans who he clearly is upset with because they just don't see the value in everything that he needs and the importance of his plan here. And it's such an interesting portrayal in almost how like the Nazi mentality can leach itself into one's brain to the point where it's like absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he just keeps seeing himself as better than everybody. I mean, even all the other Nazis, like and sure, he's pitching it like, these are worth a lot of money. The Reich is going to really want this because it's going to be valuable later down the line. But really, it's just like he really just wants this stuff. And it's such an interesting, it's a portrayal of a person who really has kind of moved past the party to a point where he sees himself as better than everybody here.
Absolutely, because he's an elitist and everybody else, like Lancaster represents sort of the populists. And so
just a train man.
He's just a train man. How would he possibly understand the value of something as transcendent as Cézanne, right? Like, how would he possibly understand? There's no world in which von Waldheim can grasp that. I think that's a great sort of testament to the ideology of the film.
Well, and it speaks so much. You have that fantastic conversation between Labiche and I think it's Didon, who are riding in the train, and Didon is like, have you ever seen any of these paintings before? And Labiche is, no, I haven't. And he's just like, well, maybe when this is all over, we should take a trip to the museum and check it out. Like that speaks so much to, again, how the idea of what this represents ends up speaking to them, inherently, like in their soul, without ever having even seen it. It just like everybody is willing to die for it. Papa Boule, right out of the gate, is willing to, put his life on the line and die for this. And that's the thing that Labiche was like, holy cow, there is something more here. And that becomes kind of that linchpin in his thinking that kind of gets him to change his tune. Again, like they've never even seen this stuff. That's what is so fascinating about the way that just it portrays all of these people. It's not just Labiche and Didon and Pesquet and Papa Boule, but it's like, as Labiche says, it's like the hundreds of people that have been helping in all of these different stops that have been changing the signs and changing the direction and all this stuff just to get past the Nazis so that they take the train a different route. It's just such a fascinating game that is played here that I think works exceptionally.
Well, yeah, and the by extension, as you broaden the lens of the film, what Frankenheimer ends up doing, like Papa Boule, I think, is the first person to die directly at the hands of the Nazis, and by the end, they're just gunning down, larger groups of people, and you realize or at least I sort of realized we're no longer talking about the culture of a group of art lovers. We're talking about the cost to the sort of heartbeat of the nation of France in this case, and the identity of free Europe in this case, and to be able to turn art into this kind of reflection is I think really expert. You want to talk about people?
Burt Lancaster, we've talked about a few times on the show in various stages of his career. He's always an interesting actor to chat about. And this is definitely not the flashy smile Lancaster that we see. I mean, this is very much the grumpy Lancaster who I don't think he cracks a smile once in this entire film. He is pretty much a hardcore train man through and through who doesn't want to do anything, out of line and just wants to get through this and, has this turn and becomes this lone figure in the fight. And it's such a fascinating portrayal for him. I mean, you could say that this really kind of fits as far as like the grumpy face Lancaster, like this and Sweet Smell of Success, I think are like two perfect Lancaster ones where it's just like he's never smiling in either of those films.
Yes. Is there like can we chart the smiling Lancaster across history? Because as we talk about him, I can't think of many films that he smiles in all of a sudden, because I think about like The Killers in Nuremberg, and like maybe he smiled in Here to Eternity a little bit.
Yeah, certainly there. I mean, I think that like when you look at the films that we have talked about of his, it's like Killer, Sweet Smell of Success. He's definitely not smiling there. But I think as you look into some of the later films of his, I mean, Elmer Gantry, he's essentially like a tent preachers and it's definitely pretty smiley in that one.
Oh, he's smiling in that one.
Fantastic film. But you jump into stuff like later in his career that we've talked about, like Atlantic City, Local Hero, and Field of Dreams. And I'm like, you're definitely getting some of that very smiley, like he's just got such a winning smile, and you can kind of see that in some of those other films.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Good point. He is a smiler. He can smile. But man, it's easy to look at his list of films and think, I don't think he's in a very good mood a lot of the time.
Well, starting in the 40s, 50s with kind of like that noir era, you can definitely see him kind of not really having an opportunity to kind of be as romantic or smiley right out of the gate. But it certainly does happen.
And then there's the poster of Vengeance Valley, and I think he's literally drawn it with a giant smile right on the poster. Which doesn't actually sound like a very happy movie. I haven't seen it.
It doesn't. It certainly doesn't. But yeah, I mean, but I think he works well here. This is one of those funny films that takes place in Europe where you have an American playing a Frenchman, you have a British person playing a Nazi, and you have a lot of other people, a lot of French, a lot of British playing other Frenchmen and Nazis, and it's just kind of an accent smorgasbord. There's really no specific accent designed for everybody. Like, you just don't see Burt Lancaster throwing accents around. So it's just like, okay, you've got him, and then you've got some of the other people like Albert Remy and Charles Milot, who are playing actual Frenchmen, and they are French. And so it's just like, then you're kind of in this place where it's like, okay, Frenchman playing French, I get it. But then you throw Burt Lancaster in, you throw Schofield in, and it's just such an amalgam.
I think they made the right choice not making him do an accent, for sure. Schofield pulls it off, German.
Does he sound German, though? Like,
a little bit, yeah.
He sounds to me like I just kind of find him kind of just doing the Schofield thing, though. Like, he very much has a very particular, his accent, like, really feels like the way that he draws out certain syllables. I find it just very Schofield. I don't know what it is about his accent, but
that's funny.
Yeah, but like all the way up through like stuff like Quiz Show and all the way back to like A Man for All Seasons, like it's just so specifically something about his voice.
That's really funny. Do you know what he is? He's like the tofu of accents. It takes on the flavor of whatever he's playing. What a gift.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I liked his menace. I think particularly with the pieces that work so well when we get those hard close-ups toward the end when he is realizing his own loss and he's like covered in sweat, and I just think he just plays indignant defeat really well. Really, really well.
Schofield is just, he's kind of just a stunning actor. And, he's one of those people. I'm like, have we talked about him on this show before? I got to look and see if we've had the chance to really discuss anything that he's been in. And I don't think so, which is pretty sad. I really enjoy his performances. I think he's such an interesting actor, and the way that he plays the Nazi colonel here, it's just, and like there is this level of kind of shock that so many of his people just don't understand the importance of what he's trying to do here, and he just gets so belligerent when they're like, well, why don't I get both cranes? And it's like it's such an interesting performance to just kind of see him as he struggles with trying to make all of this stuff happen, and clearly upset at Labiche. I mean, it's a really interesting back and forth between these two, between somebody who is just this lowly train man and this person who views himself as above everybody. It's kind of like this perfect balance that we have here.
So where do you stand on the love interest? Sort of, not really.
It's hard to say it's a love interest. I just think it's another character in the story of these people. Like, we have Labiche as he's sorting things out with his own men, with like Dudon and Pesquet, as far as like figuring plans out. What are we going to do? And Christine, I think, is another counterpoint to all of that. And Jean Moreau, I've seen her in a few of her films, and she's just always great to kind of see. I mean, she was a perfect face to include here as this worn, frustrated, ready to be done with the war hotelier who's just trying to get by and just doesn't want any more issues to come up, just wants to kind of move through it as quick as possible just to get on the other side. She lost her husband, and she carries the weight of all that so well. And the frustrations she has with Labiche and those conversations that they have, it's heartbreaking. You really feel the emotions that she's putting out, and you can really understand her perspective in all of this. And these men just keep playing these games, and it just ends up hurting everybody else. But it's touching to kind of see her come around and realize there is some value here, and that even the station master was willing to die for it. And, I really enjoyed her performance and her role in the film.
What do you know of Jean Moreau? Have you seen a lot of her films? She's done a lot of stuff, but I have to admit, I have not seen very many films of hers.
Yeah, I've only seen a few of them, things like The 400 Blows, which is a small role in that one. I know she's done a number of films with Truffaut. I saw Orson Welles' The Trial that she had been in. I feel like there have been a couple others throughout her career, but I think mostly the other ones that I really remember are ones that she did later in her career, like she popped up in Love Actually, and she popped up in
La Femme Nikita.
La Femme Nikita, and what is the other one?
Ever After?
Ever After, right? That was the other one. So she popped up in some things like that, but it's largely some of those films that I've seen where she's smaller roles that I've ended up seeing. But it's somebody who I enjoy when I do get to watch her on screen in some things.
Did you ever see, I think we might have mentioned this on the show before, Until the End of the World, 1991, Wim Wenders?
That's another one. Yeah, I really enjoy that film.
That's another one she was in, and with William Hurt, and I weirdly, talk about counter-programming for Pete. I really enjoyed that movie a lot.
Yeah, it's a great one.
So good. Yeah, she's great, and I think you're right. She really nails the sort of that fulcrum point in this film where she exists between all these sides and just wants people to stop fighting because her hotel business is suffering. Although, to what end, right? Like, is she profiting by having the Germans continue to come in and out of her hotel? Like, does that make her relationship with the occupation that much more complicated? I don't know.
Well, and I know, like, you say that, but I don't think that she's looking at it from purely a capitalistic perspective. Like,
no, I don't think so.
I think there's a lot more. Like, I think she's approaching these situations from a capitalist perspective because that seems to be the only way she can get by with these conversations with the Germans and those who are occupying and everything. But really, I think so much more of the depth of everything she's going through comes out in the subtext in those scenes, and we really kind of understand her perspective later when we find out her husband had been killed and things like that, and we get a better sense of who she is and that she's just wanting to get through all this and wants this occupation to end.
Yeah, right. Other people on Labiche's A-team, we mentioned Charles Millot, who's another one who's been in just kind of a lot of stuff. And I don't feel like I've seen, he ends up being a total face to me. I wouldn't be able to tell you what else I've seen him in now besides The Train.
I enjoy largely a lot of these people that they pull in. I don't know what I've seen much of them in general, other than like Michel Simon, who I just watched recently a film. As we've been going through these different series, I've been kind of watching some other films from those same years to kind of look at what else has been released to see if it perhaps fits in. Like he did Port of Shadows in 1939, which is a really beautiful, very interesting film. He was in Panic in 1946. That was one of the ones that I said certainly would fit in with, kind of our 40s category. It's just a really fascinating film. And he's the lead in that. Just a great film. Definitely worth checking out. So he's the face of them that I recognized the most. And I thought he was fantastic as Papa Boole.
A lot of faces. It's all great. We talked about Lancaster doing his own stunts, but really that's another thing that this movie is known for, is the fact that they used a lot of real trains and it made everything look very, very big.
Well, and I think there is some interesting element of that to just talking about Frankenheimer in general, because I mean, this is a person who came from the background of live television, and when you look at kind of how he directs this, there is this kind of direct approach to just kind of the way things are portrayed. You know, you've got the bombing raids, and you've got the all of the stuff going on. Like, it's blocked in a way to kind of build the tension with all of the little bits of minutia that have to happen. Like, you got to hop off and you got to hit the little switch to get the train onto the different track, and like all the things that they're doing. Like, we really get a sense of building the tension through the way that he's kind of depicting all of these things, and just like the black and white, the starkness. I think all of that works well to kind of capture everything with how real it is with these trains. I mean, they destroyed several trains in reality, like, and not to mention many cameras in the process of filming the train wrecks. And it just feels like we're right there. Like, when you have that camera, like when the train crashes into the one that's blocking the tracks, and you just have that low camera close to the ground, and you just see the whole thing like barreling right toward the camera. Like, you know that was one of the cameras that got destroyed, but damn, it made for some really incredible footage. And I think like just the realism of all of that, paired with Frankenheimer's direction and the action, and knowing that we're watching Lancaster like really running and jumping onto these trains and all this sort of stuff. I mean, we're getting some intense stuff that I think just builds incredibly well with the way that Frankenheimer is putting all of this together.
The one thing that stuck out to me was when they throw the switches, particularly in the switch house, right? When they have the whole row of switches back and forth, and one gets stuck, there's the pipe under it. The way they throw those switches looks very, very easy. Like, it is just incredibly easy to just featherweight pull those switches. They're down on the tracks. They jump off the train. They're throwing switches. They look very, very easy. Those guys must be made of muscle, because train switches are not easy to throw. And I found myself thinking, I think I would embarrass myself throwing those train switches. They're a lot of work. It's a lot of metal.
Not having thrown one before, I can't speak to that exactly, but it looks, I mean, there's something that was really magical about that whole dance anyway, because you're getting a sense of like, sure, there's perhaps some complexity and definitely needs some muscle in the process of throwing these switches, but also it involves a man up there with binoculars watching what's going on, making sure the trains are in the right spots to tell them to throw a particular switch, having to know, okay, we've got to hit switch 3, having the switch guy doing the switches. Like, it was a beautiful choreography of all of that. And then to kind of brilliantly, like, we had planted that pipe a few minutes earlier, like that had been tossed by the German, and then finding out that they had used that as a ploy to kind of create this entire scenario. It was just, I mean, it was fantastic. And it makes you wonder, like, what was Lancaster's plan up to that point where he saw the pipe as the opportunity, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I thought it was just great. That you're absolutely right. Thinking about that dance when he is on the binoculars is extraordinary. You know, throw 5, throw 10. Incredible attention to very, very fine lines. Being able to see where those tracks need to be thrown is a real expert job. I thought that was fun, really fun. It's wizardry.
And I think a lot of it speaks to, I mean, just kind of, I think fitting in line with what we've been talking about with all of this, just, you know, the way that the cinematographers worked to put this film together. This was shot by 2 cinematographers, Jean Tournier and Walter Woditz. I don't know if I'm saying either of those names right, but Jean Tournier, at least, is one that I'm more familiar with because, aside from this, also worked on the brilliant The Day of the Jackal, which is fantastic, especially in just kind of the cinematic comparison between the two. I think you could really draw kind of with very much kind of a much more straightforward realism style that I think speaks strongly to both of those. And then, of course, jumping onto crazy things like Moonraker. And so it's kind of, you know, some kind of a big jump from that one. But I think that the cinematography here, especially, again, working in black and white with what we're seeing here, I just think it's an interesting choice to look at this film as something that was shot in black and white, because with the paintings, with the action and everything, you can really see why they may have wanted to do this in color. But I think just the black and white lends to this this real intense, like, I don't know, it just feels like in a world of smoke and trains and grease, and like you see Lancaster just drenched in all the grease from the work and everything. It just ends up feeling like this film is appropriately black and white because of the world we're in.
And expert use of it. I mean, it just feels really resonant. And I think, there's something about looking at, I was thinking about the Peter Jackson. So yeah, he came up with all this incredibly smart stuff that allows us to AI our way into taking World War I footage and smoothing it and colorizing it and making it look like it was shot on today's camera. Yeah, speed correcting, all of that stuff. And when it came out a couple of years ago, I took my father-in-law, we went and we saw that in the theater, and it was an incredible experience. And also, it didn't feel like it happened anymore, right? Like modernizing it, there was some stuff that's just gruesome and horrifying and feels so resonant. But because our brains are tuned to seeing history the way history looked at the time, I think it actually it was beautiful. It was an exercise in technology that was incredible, and it might have done a little bit of a disservice to our sense memory of what that time is, because we grew up with seeing the footage on the technology as it was created. This movie, I think, making the choice to go black and white gave it a sense of action that made it feel more real to me, because that's what I'm used to looking at war footage looking like. Am I making a case?
No, I think that's a very strong case, especially at the time, coming from people who had been used to seeing World War II footage that was broadcast in newsreels and stuff at the starts of movies in black and white. Like, people were used to seeing black and white footage depicting World War II. Like, that was kind of the way it had been portrayed, outside of, like, the John Wayne movies and things like that. But when you're looking at like the news footage, it was black and white. And so this fits very much with knowing that Frankenheimer came from TV, when you get a sense that this is black and white, and it just ends up feeling much more newsreel raw than something that John Wayne would be in.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's one of the things for me, that sort of sensibility of the film that feels it takes me to the place. It feels more accurate of the time.
Yeah, very true. We do have, I think, some pretty great music for this by Maurice Jarre that I think fits the film. It's not something you really walk out humming, but what I find really powerful, and this might speak to give us a chance to talk about the end of the film. You have this great theme that kind of builds through the film. And then at the end, as we're looking at just these still shots of the boxes of paintings just laying on the side of the hill there next to the train, and all the dead bodies of the hostages that they had killed also just laying there in the grass on the side of the hill. And then you see Labiche just kind of walking off by himself down the road. You just have the theme singled out in a lone harmonica that just kind of plays, and it just becomes this kind of haunting reflection of everything that had gone on, all of the action, all of the resistance and everything, just left with, again, boxed paintings. We're not even seeing the paintings still, it's just like boxes with names on them paired with all of this stuff. And I think it just, like, what a way to end a film when we're contemplating this idea of what these humans are doing in order to save artwork. And then we're seeing this very literal comparison of the dead humans that it took to get these pieces of art laying here. And it's just, what a strong, powerful way to kind of end a film that really leaves us as an audience kind of questioning everything.
Yeah, I think so too. And just the overall use of sound, I think the movie is really extraordinary. But that's the way they play with the music, and it got me looking at the Jarre dynasty, right? I mean, Kevin Jarre was an actor and a director and producer. He passed away, but Jean-Michel Jarre is just a fantastic and sort of crazy testament to the legacy of families in film, and his music is also kind of extraordinary.
Maurice Jarre, this is coming just a few years after the incredible incredible score for Lawrence of Arabia, which is
Yes.
perhaps one of his greats, certainly. But I mean, it is a very rich career full of amazing music. The, work with David Lean over the years, all the way into, the 80s and 90s with things. And we've talked about him on like Jacob's Ladder. And he also did Ghost, which is, a very famous score of his. And I think Jarre's scores, I mean, look at stuff like Dead Poets Society and then Fatal Attraction and Witness. It was just all over the place with just some amazing, amazing film music.
Well, yeah, 178 composer credits. Like it just sort of breaks my brain a little bit, especially like when I talk to used to talk to my grandmother and would talk to her about the scope of time that she saw. Like, look at what guys like Jarre saw in the evolution of film scoring. Like, that's an entire universe of change and extraordinary scores for films across entirely different generations of filmmaking. That's just incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. What else you got? Anything else you want to hit on? You want to teach me about this movie?
I feel like we've covered a lot of material with this. I mean, it's an incredibly strong film. It just gets better every time. I think Lancaster is such an interesting figure to play this character. And I appreciate, we didn't really talk about the fact that this is kind of one of those films Lancaster had been producing at the time with his little production company. And this was one of the films of that period that he had released that I think just speaks to an actor really working hard to find strong projects to back that, were more than just an opportunity to be, a star on the silver screen.
So that brings us to why we're here today, I think.
Yes, BAFTAs, 1965 nominees for Best Film from Any Source.
All right. This is the end, right?
Yeah, our final episode for this series. We talked about Beckett. We dropped our Dr. Strangelove conversation back into the mix. We talked about The Pumpkin Eater, and here we are with The Train. Again, this is not just Best British Films. This is basically anything was up for grabs. So do you have anything else from 1964 that you're like, well, I definitely would have thought that film should have been included on this list?
It's hard for me to just throw movies into this list. But give me a sense. What are the movies that you throw in to 1964?
Yeah, I always jump into my Letterboxd list and then I look at, okay, let's go to my list from 1964. What have I seen?
Mary Poppins.
That's the easiest way to look. Stuff like, Mary Poppins, absolutely. The Naked Kiss, for sure. I enjoyed the Americanization of Emily quite a bit. I thought that was great. Failsafe was a great film. Goldfinger, when you're looking at James Bond,
God,
absolutely
I was going to throw
strong.
Goldfinger, sure.
Yeah, A Fistful of Dollars, Nothing But a Man,
7 Days in May.
7 Days in May. We've talked about the other version of The Killers, which is I kind of love that one too. One of my favorites that we haven't really brought up at all, but I absolutely think should have been included is the film Seance on a Wet Afternoon. Unfortunately, it's a difficult film to track down over here. I take that back. Actually, it's playing on the Criterion Channel and Max right now, but it wasn't when I first tracked it down. I had to buy a disc from England in order to watch it, but it's well worth it because it is a brilliant film. So it's a strong year, lot of strong nominees. So if you had to restrict it to just 4, where would you land?
I just want to throw in A Shot in the Dark too. If we're going to get Dr. Strangelove, then throwing in A Shot in the Dark is not too far afield. So
I really need to rewatch that one. I haven't seen it in probably since high school.
I like the movies that are in this list. I think I enjoyed my experience with the movies that are in this list. I think I would probably throw in Mary Poppins just because of what it has become. And I think I don't know what it was like opening day on Mary Poppins as a family film, but it feels important. I would probably throw in, I don't know. What are your hard passes? Is that it? I think that might be it.
I also forgot to mention The Pawnbroker, which is a Sidney Lumet film. That may be... I haven't watched it since I started letterboxing. I need to revisit that one. It's been on my list forever. That may be another 5-star from the year. If I'm just looking strictly at how I've rated films, Mary Poppins and Doctor Strangelove are the 2 5-star films I have from the year. And then I have Failsafe, Nothing But a Man, Seance on a Wet Afternoon, and Goldfinger as 4.5 stars. Oh, and The Train, I would also include in that list of 5 stars. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I would put it up there too. So, I mean, God, if I had to just go off of what I have, either 5 or 4.5 stars, I'd probably say Mary Poppins, Doctor Strangelove, The Train, and Seance on a Wet Afternoon. That's probably what I would pick as my best films from any source.
I do have one more to add from 1964, which is a film called The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies! ! Question mark. Why did I watch that movie? That's a real movie, and I did watch it, and it is a terrible, terrible movie, but I watched it, and I reviewed it. I have a review in it. I wouldn't put that on this list.
So funny.
But that's why we're here. And what ended up winning?
Doctor Strangelove, of the 4, ended up winning. And that's what I would pick as well. It didn't end up doing nearly as well at the Oscars, as we talked about on our episode. But it did well at the BAFTAs, and it did take the win out of these 4 films here.
Okay. Kind of a bummer we didn't talk about it right now. I know it's in our feed, but I'd like to watch that again. I need another excuse to watch that movie. I don't need an excuse to do anything. I'm a grown man. I can watch a movie when I want to watch a damn movie.
Stop the show. We're putting it on right now. All right. Well, let's call it quits there with this episode. So we'll be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Martin Kuringer, Oriel Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. All right, how to do it award season besides losing that very special BAFTA.
Yeah, exactly. It did get nominated over the Oscars for Best Writing, Story, and Screenplay, written directly for the screen, but it lost to the film Darling, which is another really interesting, really strong film from the year. Really great year, honestly. There are a lot of strong films from 1964 as you kind of walk through them. We talked about the BAFTAs already. At the Motion Picture Exhibitor Magazine's Laurel Awards, Lancaster was nominated for Best Action Performance, but I think fittingly lost to Sean Connery in Goldfinger. And then, of course, the National Board of Review did put it on its top 10 films of the year. So I think people probably were thinking this was more of an action film, and so it didn't necessarily fit the awards needs, the awards circles. But I think with time, people have really kind of started respecting this action film more, finding a lot more to it.
It's because they actually realized Lancaster actually slid down that ladder thing 3 stories and jumped on a high-speed train. That was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And then they thought, oh, this should win stuff.
Exactly.
All right. Well, how to do at the box office?
Well, Frankenheimer's gripping war film cost $5.8 million to make, which is about $55.7 million in today's dollars. The movie opened in France September 24th, 1964, then the UK October 29th, 1964, before finally opening in the States March 7th, 1965, opposite Warhol's art film Empire and the murderous drama Nightmare in the Sun. The movie went on to earn $6.8 million, or $65.3 million in today's dollars, that landed the film in the black with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $75,000.
You go, Frankie. Not bad. Nobody else called him Frankie but me. This was great. I'm really glad we talked about it. I'm glad to have been introduced to it. What a just incredibly fun movie about some very hard things.
It's one that only gets better with each subsequent watch. So I'm glad that you have seen it. I'm glad to have revisited it. And it's definitely a film I'm already looking forward to watching again. So with that, we'll be right back for our ratings. But first, here's the trailer for next week's movie. Kicking off our next series, the 1976 Hugo Awards Best Dramatic Presentation nominees. We are looking at L.Q. Jones's A Boy and His Dog.
Charles Champlin of the Los Angeles Times says, a coherent, alternate world, kind of a funny nightmare recited as upcoming fact. It is an offbeat delight. KMET Radio, Los Angeles, gripping, horrific, a bitter vision of tomorrow, tightly controlled, compelling, bizarre, and witty. Time Magazine's Richard Schickel says, ironic, risks being absurd, yet compels respect for some witty writing and well-paced direction. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times says, wacky success, weird, offbeat, unique, magnificently inspired. Richard Eder of the New York Times says, brilliantly grotesque. The Austin Sun, this may be the best science fiction film ever made. A Boy and His Dog. A film that has become a cult legend.
Right now I'm hungry and I want to get laid.
That's what you always say.
You go find a chick and I'll hustle us up some food.
I can't do good work when I'm hungry.
You ain't pulling that crap on me again. And you can shove that part about how you lost the ability to hunt for food when you learned how to talk.
No food, no females.
After World War IV, your dog will tell you what to do. How to laugh, how to love, how and who to kill.
That stupid broad.
You're so funny when you're sexually frustrated.
Damn it. How in the hell am I going to nail her in there?
Simple. Stop shaking like a leaf and go do it.
If you continue to find the food for your dog, he will find you a woman. He is the only one who can.
Give him the girl.
We stay. Now, you got any helpful suggestions?
Yes, pull up your pants, Romeo.
In the future, your dog will tell you how to survive. Or you will die.
A woman can't get pregnant. Every once in a while, we need new blood.
Horse manure.
You mean you want me to knock up your broad?
Lack of respect, wrong attitude, failure to obey authority.
Oh, get the dramatic catch out of your voice and tell me how she's going to carry her share of the load up here. Tell me how we're going to fight
All right, okay, just don't hang her.
Harangue, not hang her.
I don't care whatever the hell it is. You just knock off the crap and we can forget the whole stinking...
Well, maybe we should, you simple dumb putz.
What the hell's a putt? What's a putt? Is that something bad? I bet it is. It's something bad. Well, I'll tell you, you better watch your stinking mouth or I'm going to kick you in the butt.
If you can imagine an excuse for World War IV, you will understand a talking dog.
Try to get back as quick as I can. Will you wait?
For a while. Then over the hill. I'll miss you, Pig. I'll really miss you.
L.Q. Jones, A Boy and His Dog. A film that has become a legend by word of mouth. Rated R.
It is hard to believe we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material for all of our adapted film discussions. Purchasing through our links supports the show.
In Season 13, we explore various awards categories and the films nominated in them.
We wrapped up our 1940 Best Picture series with adaptations of Mice and Men from John Steinbeck and Wuthering Heights from Emily Bronte's novel, not to mention the play Dark Victory by George Brewer Jr. and Bertram Bloch.
The 1947 Academy Award adapted screenplay series featured Anna and the King of Siam, based on Margaret Langdon's book, plus The Best Years of Our Lives, Brief Encounter, and The Killers.
The 1952 cinematography nominees included Death of a Salesman and A Streetcar Named Desire, A Place in the Sun, based on both a play and a book, and Strangers on a Train, based on Patricia Highsmith's first novel.
So many great movies based on books and plays, like Beckett, The Pumpkin Eater,
A Boy and His Dog, Rollerball,
The Princess Bride, Congo, The Scarlet Letter,
Jackie Brown, The Deep End, The Gray, The Woman in Black,
and Top Gun Maverick, which I'm very much looking forward to revisiting.
Get the source books at thenextreel.com/originals.
Start your next read or reread from the movies we've covered. Visit thenextreel.com/originals today. You know, I haven't seen this one either.
What?
Boy and His Dog.
My goodness.
Yeah, I know.
This is, let me just warn you, this film, it's definitely a kind of a dark depiction of the post-apocalyptic world. Dark in the way men think about women, I suppose you could say. It is pretty gross, but that was kind of I think Harlan Ellison's point.
Yeah.
In the writing of it. And I think that's one of the interesting things about the film. It kind of grossed me out when I first watched it, but now knowing a little bit more about it, I'm definitely looking forward to getting into it. But just knowing that going in, I think might help.
Okay. What happens to dogs? Is there a dog thing that I have to worry about? Like, is there an old Yeller level dog thing?
Just know that in the future, because of the apocalypse, dogs now, at least this dog, has the ability to mental telepathy communicate with our boy. But the dog also cannot do anything, like he can't hunt or get food on his own. He relies on the boy to get food for him. So he's a very smart talking dog who needs the boy to feed him.
Which obviously there's going to be heartstrings pulled.
It's not necessarily a heartstring pulling sort of movie.
Is it it's a thing. They shoot the boy at the end. Is that the deal? They shoot the boy. There's a real subversion of the old Yeller grief. The dog shoots the boy.
To stop talking about. Let's.
Okay, that's all.
Oh my gosh.
Letterboxd, Andy. How do you handle Letterboxd for the drain? Is it 1 star per car?
It's 1 star per car they paint. No, it's a film that gets better each time. I was surprised at myself when I went back and looked at my original review of this. I gave it only 3.5 stars. And it's funny because in my recollection, I was like, oh, it's a 5-star film. Like it works so well for me. And so I was surprised. And I think what happened is just like, I wasn't sure what to make of it on my initial reaction. And then the more I thought about it, it always improved. I just never went back and changed my rating. But it's an easy now, as I walked in and then just watching it, it's an easy 5-star film. It's so strong, so powerful. So that's where I sit with this one.
Yeah, it's absolutely a 5-star for me too. Just on first watch, it's fine. It's fine living right there. It's a great film. I really enjoyed my time with it, and I can't wait to put this on. Watch it again.
Remember, you can find us over at Letterboxd. I'm at Soda Creek Film. Pete is at Pete Wright, and you can check out our 5-star and hearts reviews for this film, along with everything else we have reviewed. And of course, the show is at The Next Reel. So what did you think about The Train? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
I went high-ish and short. It's high and short.
Mine too. 4 stars and a heart is where I like
Is it funny? Is yours funny?
Maybe.
Okay, we're going to
Funny-ish.
have maybe a little funny off. Let's see
Ooh.
which Letterboxd reviewer gives us a bigger chuckle. You go first.
I've got 4 stars by Koi Vin, who says, Frankenheimer asks why we fight, but also he asks, what if we blow up a train yard?
Okay, that was pretty good. You're going in strong. Okay, I come with Will Menaker's 4.5 star, who says, in the waning days of the Nazi occupation, heroic French railroad workers attempt to stop the theft of France's cultural heritage, a train loaded with thousands of racist cartoons. That was funny, right? That was pretty funny.
It was pretty funny.
All right, I think Coy probably has it. Oh, well. Thanks, Letterboxd.